My guests today are Julie Weingart, CFO of Exadel, our financial guru who has taken a critical role in Exadel's growth through significant strategic acquisitions over the last few years. And Supriya Rout, Associate Director of Data and Analytics at CCC Intelligent Solutions, where she manages a team of data engineers and data modelers and is a valued client of Exadel. Welcome, ladies. Let's dive straight in. So, in the early days of your career, what was the one bet that you made on yourself that everyone else said was a bad investment?
Karen, you asked me two things comes to my mind. First is staying put with my current employer and carving my own path. I joined CCC long time before, like 15 years before, as a junior employee, and I moved around different development roles before becoming a people leader. Now, there have been times when some of my close friends, colleagues, move around for exciting new opportunities, and I doubted my intentions then. However, I strongly believed in my role, my company, and the ecosystem of products we build for our customers. I tried to spend time understanding my strengths and the areas that I need to improve. I invested in emerging new technologies, learning, adapting, and took challenging opportunities when they came to me, and it all paid off. So there is no right answer, but I believe that if you have faith in yourself and your goals, someday it all pays off. Second, that comes to my mind is leading through emotional intelligence. You know, as technology company, a lot of people believe that technical leaders need to invest heavily in understanding the in-depth knowledge of the skills that requires them to deliver a project successfully. However, emotional intelligence plays a crucial role because we all manage a team of talented people, and a true leader cannot manage people, they need to be led. Now, emotional intelligence comes through as a pivotal point where you understand your team, their aspirations, goals, and then you align those to the company objectives. And that's how you build a high-performing team. And that's what I have today to share.
That's great. Julie, how about you in your early career?
I'm actually going to go back to when I was in school, right? And so, you know, when you're doing a traditional accounting, you have a couple of different paths, right? So you go on to get your master's and people are like, okay, do you want to do audit or do you want to do tax? And it was like, and everybody wants to do audit. And I said, well, I always want to do what everyone else is not doing. So I'm doing tax, and people are like, oh my gosh, that's so boring. And so, you just don't seem like a tax person. I thought, no, this is an opportunity. The class sizes are smaller. I think that there's a lot of things I can do in my career that's going to set me apart from others. And so I went ahead and got a master's in tax, and that allowed me to actually go to Ernst & Young, into their tax consulting practice, which then exposed me to a higher level of work than, you know, some of the people that I went to school with who chose audit. It was, you know, structuring different, you know, legal entity structures to make sure we were optimizing tax. But then it allowed me to look at, get into the operations of the business, the financials, the entire piece of, you know, client service. And so I was glad that I chose the boring route, I guess. So
I guess not so boring now.
No, not so boring now.
And what trends are you seeing globally regarding women in leadership roles?
You know, globally in leadership roles, I'm seeing where more women are going after operations roles, like COOs, and that's a really great sign. You know, about 5 to 6 years ago, we saw an increase of women in tech and finance, and now I see it pivoting to operations, which then allows women to have an opportunity to be a CEO. So that, that is very much different, than I've seen that in the last couple of years. So I'm really happy and really encouraged to see that.
That's great.
And for women in technology, there is growth and progress, but it's slow. If I look at entry level, we have a decent representation across a lot of technology companies, but as we move across the career ladder, the growth stalls. And this is primarily around mid-career growth, where a woman could be anywhere between a manager to director level. But at the same time, they are actually performing at the peak of their career. So what can help? Because all of this gap is due to the promotions gap that women face with respect to their male colleagues. Twofold. One, I think for women like me, like all of us who are in technology is always evolving. There is always new things to learn. As long as we are investing our time and energy towards emerging technologies, that helps us to stay relevant. That helps us to, I would say, acquire new challenging opportunities when we see. The second part of it is for leaders, for companies, to find these aspired women, to believe in them, to give them visibility into senior leadership, to give them these projects where they can show their technical abilities. And I would say just make these promotion criteria transparent and make it visible so that they are comfortable, they are trustable for that next career leap.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we're here in beautiful LA today, but Julie, you're usually based in Tampa. What's the tech scene like there?
So really about, 5 years ago, we saw a lot of cybersecurity startups in the area. And now some of those have become behemoths, ReliaQuest and KnowBe4, which then attracted some other startup software engineering companies, software companies like ConnectWise that had really great capitalization events. So Tampa became a very, very popular hub for software engineering talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Supriya, thanks for coming all the way from Illinois today. What trends have you seen there regarding tech scene?
In Midwest or in Chicago, I would say, like every other cities, there is rapid adoption of AI. Mm-hmm. AI is reshaping every industry, every role, how things were done before. In every technology company, more or less, there is a lot of coding assistant tools for developers. For example, Copilot, Cursor, Claude, which makes their productivity boost go up. And there is a lot of debate, I would say, whether AI is going to take our jobs or not. I firmly believe that those engineers who are taking these AI tools and making them productive, or they are using these AI tools to make their existing system scalable, are going to be relevant, are in high demand. There is also a lot of debate on whether using a lot of AI in our day-to-day job is going to make our human, like the critical thinking skills go down. Are we how are we going to behave certain years? I guess the secret is to find the right balance where you use these AI assistants to make your life better, to make you effective and productive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there is a lot of platform modernization every company is going through, where they're taking their existing systems and moving to cloud for making them, I would say, speedy delivery, to make their systems resilient, and to make it scalable. So that's also a lot of industry, I would say, trend going on. And last but not least is every company calling employees back to work in a hybrid work culture. Now, from company perspective, they want this so that people can be in office to collaborate, to be the momentum going, and to build that team cohesion. But when it comes to people, they're trying to find that right balance between managing their personal commitment and work.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
yeah, some of these things to share.
I think it's a great opportunity for people at this point, especially in software engineering, to come back into the office, at least hybrid, because as they optimize some of the more routine activities with AI, then this allows them to be exposed to leadership like yourself and to others to build that skill set, that emotional intelligence, that if they can leverage AI and then they can hone that skill, that's what's going to be really, really valuable to businesses going forward. So
Absolutely.
it's well timed for people in software engineering.
Actually, there was a study recently that one of the skills of the future is actually going to be emotional intelligence and your ability to apply it. So it's super important to have that. Mm-hmm. So software development is still a very male-dominated environment, regardless of the progress that's been made. And we've made a lot of progress in the tech industry in general, but we've also still got a long way to go. Have you ever felt that you've had to prove your technical credibility more so than your male counterparts at any point in your career journey, Supriya?
I'm sure many women out there will have their share of stories to share. And yes, I have mine. While I am surrounded by a lot of talented male colleagues, there have been times when they are delegated with some of the technical designs over me, assuming they might come up with a better solution or architecture. While I felt hurt, I didn't let this intimidate me. I work for data analytics, so I always believed in data. So I over-prepared myself. I over-prepared all the scenarios. I over-prepared my design. I thought through what are some of the questions that can come. And I think presented all of that. And that's how I kind of gained my credibility in those circumstances. And I must say I am surrounded by people, leaders who definitely believe in me.
That's great. And Julie, you mentioned earlier that you, after studying law, went straight into the world of tax, corporate tax at EY. And you've been in a variety of different industries after that, including a year at Ironman.
Yes.
I'm sure there's an interesting story there. But what's been the driver behind the pivots that you've made in your career? And which one do you feel had the biggest impact?
So I've always wanted to continue to challenge myself and to grow and to learn new areas and to plug myself into companies where I know that I could drive value. And that's really where, at different moments in time when I went and joined different companies, different roles, is looking at what do they need and how can I provide value, and then how can these companies continue to help me grow my career and my experiences. I think I would go back to when I was with a large North American truck hauler, which doesn't sound very glamorous, but I had the opportunity to help them expand internationally and was able to close almost 10 acquisitions with them, helping them expand in the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands. And providing value was really about getting to know the entrepreneurs behind these businesses and building their trust. And it's something that I learned was such an important skill set, not only when you're doing mergers and acquisitions, but when you're just working in a corporate environment in general. So that was definitely an example of where I felt like I could really add value.
Yeah, and now in the world of private equity, it's highly scrutinized, right? So what's been your leadership approach in this environment, and what challenges have you faced as opposed to maybe other industries that you've worked in?
Yeah, so I've had a chance to work for and hold C-suite positions with several different private equity companies. So I understand the balance. We want to make sure that we're building opportunities for our employees and our management team from a career growth perspective. And we also want to drive value for our investors. And that's where you have to learn to blend the two worlds and understand that private equity in their investment in their companies, it needs to move at a faster pace and it needs to be transformative. And that is something that it's not for everyone. You have to be able to go in, make quick decisions, know that some of them aren't going to be perfect. You're not going to be, things sometimes will get messy, but you just continue to push through and make sure that you're making decisions timely to drive that value and pivot if you have to. But I really like that environment so much more than other traditional forms of ownership of companies. I like the private equity model because of that.
That's great. And we talk about values, but what about personal values and what we have as our intrinsic value systems? Have you ever felt the need to compromise your own values in your leadership journey?
I would say there are two things that comes to my mind that I would probably never compromise. First is resilience. As a leader, a lot of the times your team echoes your energy and how you feel about it. And in technology, there would be times when especially things are not going right at the time of crisis. You just need to bounce back faster, because when there are things not going right, our customers are impacted. When systems are down, we need to bounce back faster. And resilience is all about coping up, ability to adapt faster, and how to move things forward. And that's something I think is very important. And I echo that day in, day out as a practice in my job. Second thing that comes to me is empathy. I would say, when I was a kid growing up, my family was my role model. And they always helped who needed the most, and very empathetic family. I didn't understand those values then. But later on in life, I just thought it's a life skill that you learn. As a leader, you need to be a very thoughtful listener to your people, understand what they want, their goals, bring that psychological safety within the team where they can approach you for anything and everything, and provide support and guidance for whatever they need, wherever they need, and also hold them accountable for their actions. So those two things comes to my mind.
There's some really great takeaways there, actually. And Julie, what about personal values that you've refused to compromise on in your leadership journey?
So personal values, or more personality traits, I would say, that not staying quiet, trusting your gut, right? And, a lot of times people challenge and say, well, maybe you shouldn't say that, or maybe you shouldn't rock the boat. And every time when I have a gut feeling, I speak up. And I do that because of the greater good of the employee base and the company. And it's just something that, even early on my career, I was coached, well, maybe you shouldn't be so vocal. And that is absolutely not true. And I'm glad I did not listen to that, because that's helped me get to where I am in to help, the companies I work for be successful. And, the other thing is just being able to help people grow in their careers. And that's a value of mine, is just to make sure that I'm taking care of the people that work so hard with me and that they continue to grow. I want them to take my job ultimately. And that's a value that I've always been, very serious about is that I want people to work with who are smarter than me and who can have the ability to do what I do one day.
I think something that comes to my mind when Julie was speaking was being vocal, especially as women. There are times when you have these excellent ideas and you have your own thought. You bring some different, I would say, ideas to the table that nobody else is thinking, but it might be intimidating when you are sitting with a room full of people. You are like not sure what to say, how you get perceived. You should believe in yourself, believe in your guts, and if you think this is right, you should always propose. Do not shy away from throwing up these ideas, and probably sometimes they are the best ones in the room.
Yeah, for sure. We speak about bringing ideas and personal values and our whole selves to work, and sometimes that can encourage some, let's say, brash feedback, right? What's been some of the most uncomfortable feedback that you've received, and how did you take it on board, or did you?
Long time back, it takes big back to memories of when I was a junior engineer and I was looking for some career growth at that time. The feedback I got was probably I am not technically sound enough, or I'm not doing my job well enough that stands me out for my promotion. And back then, I think it was intimidating. I was upset. Now that I think about it, it was probably some scapegoating tactics where you are taking all the blame for some of the, I would say, poor leadership, where some of these things should have been thought through, well executed by my manager who was driving the project then. But back then I was a little bit upset, intimidated, but I didn't let all of these things define me. I worked harder. I worked harder to prove my credibility to my senior leadership. I worked harder to make sure that these feedback doesn't resonate me, and how do I evolve as a person to next level. And it all worked out, and I think sometimes your actions speak for yourself, and knowledge is the greatest gift. I mean, it doesn't have to be a male or female or anybody.
Yeah.
That's the greatest equalizer, and that makes you stand out. So
feedback can be hard to take sometimes, though. It goes straight to the heart. Julie, what about you? Anything that's made you feel uncomfortable with feedback that you've had previously, and what did you do about it?
Yeah, it's scary. I have a similar situation early on in my career. It's uncanny that what you described was exactly what I experienced. But I'll give another example. So, I kind of go back to what I was talking about before about, speaking up and providing your ideas. And I was provided feedback that, in board meetings, I should be quiet and not, and not speak and really just be an observer. And I thought about that, but then I looked at all of my other colleagues who were men at the time, and I thought, well, they're not getting this feedback. And I took it, and I thought, well, when I do speak, I'm going to make sure that it's crisp, it's to the point, and it resonates with at the time was private equity group. And that made me even that much more effective in board meetings. So I think at the time it was upsetting because it was like, okay, well, this feels like, very gender specific. But I used it and I channeled it to, be a very, very effective member of the board at that point.
And that's great. I think it's often thought that women end up diluting some part of themselves or their professional persona, or indeed their own personalities because of the rooms that they are suddenly in. Has that ever been the case for you?
Women are already, I would say they are always smart to read the room and behave appropriately. But however, I think There are two things I really don't dilute, but I would say I refine it in my job. As a person, I'm very cheerful and high energy. Now, I take all that energy, and in my job every day, I just keep the momentum going. I am always like, what's we're doing next? Let's move on to the next challenge. What else is coming? So I just keep that momentum going for my team, and I think it's a good, I would say, balance. And from being cheerful, I would say I resonate it to being optimistic. I'm mostly calm. When there are things not going right, I'm always calm. And then I think I'm always optimistic also about if something as a failure, like how do we bounce back and what are the learnings we take away from all of this and do not repeat it itself. So all of these is like some sort of optimism that every day consistently I work towards.
And I can't imagine you diluting any part of your personality, Julie, but on the off chance that that's ever happened, is there a tip or piece of advice that you would give to women if they're being asked to be less or be quieter?
Yeah, I would say that it's just coming back and being that much more confident and prepared. So if you felt like, at the time you were in a meeting and somebody was just speaking over you, or they weren't getting the message, or they weren't actively listening, which happens quite a bit for some women, it's being prepared and feeling like you can interject when you should. So a lot of times it's very hard in a meeting when you're a good listener and you're being patient and you're a kind person and you don't want to just speak over people, but you see sometimes when you're in a male-dominated meeting it's very hard to get in a word edgewise. And so there's definitely an art to that, and if you can learn that and continue to push through, that's a very, very helpful skill set.
And definitely coming prepared and having the data that tells the story.
That's right.
That surely helps.
Yep.
So the world of work has really changed since we had the pandemic, the global pandemic, and people are more and more conscious of their health and their well-being. Supriya, how do you build a focus around wellness and looking after yourself and your team while you're balancing that with building a resilient, high-performing function?
One thing we need to understand is in order to build a high-performing team, your team should not feel burned out, meaning every day they are waking up and excited about their job. And a couple of things that probably we can try so that we are building or we are working towards that. One is when there is a lot of unclear priorities, we move around a lot of things, and that causes a lot of last-minute stress and burnout, which means I have to do a better job of planning and execution for my team so they understand what are our objectives, goals, and working towards that. The other thing that comes to my mind is within the team, again, it goes back to psychological safety of people speaking their minds, meaning they should clearly call out the risks when they feel there is. They shouldn't be feeling intimidated to talk their mind, to trust each other, to build that team cohesion, because we all work as a group or a team to achieve to our common goal. And lastly, just helping each other. Everyone is unique or they have different skill sets to bring. As long as they all are complementing, it builds one super productive, cohesive team. Now, I also do frequent one-on-ones with my team to see where they stand, what are their goals, if we are working towards that goal, and also sending kudos, recognizing every small or big things that we achieve as a team. Recognition is very important. We all like to be thanked for when we are doing a good job.
Yeah.
And I would say last thing comes to my mind is I have a family and I love to spend time with them. I love to see my child growing up and reaching milestones, and same thing each of my team deserves, to carving out that space for themselves, their families, doing things they like to do. Because, you know, when you show up at work every day, you bring your whole self. And it is impossible to bring your whole self if you are struggling at your personal boundaries or achieving that personal life balance there. So all in all, I would say supporting your team, whatever it needs to be, and then just giving them space to grow and achieve their goals.
I think especially in global roles where you have maybe a dispersed team across multiple time zones, multiple countries, it can be really hard to get that balance.
Yes.
Have you changed the way that you work post-pandemic, Julie? Or?
I mean, I think that it's interesting because even though a lot of us work remotely, I feel like even when we were in the office, we're almost a tighter group. You know, in the office, everybody just stays in their office and doesn't really communicate. I feel like, you know, sometimes when we're, you know, working remotely, we're on more meetings, we're communicating more, we're on Slack. It's actually, I think, allowed for us to break down the hierarchical barriers where people aren't intimidated to reach out to, you know, their boss's boss or to, you know, a C-suite member at the other end of the organization, because it's all about getting the job done. And they're just, I don't know if it's just a lack of the intimidation factor of everybody being in an office, you know, and you see those fancy plaques on the door. It's kind of leveled all of us and really accelerated this team mentality. I think it's, you know, that's really how I've seen things change. And it's really great for, you know, team members that I've worked with for many years. I saw their career and their, you know, the knowledge base that they've had grow exponentially as a result of it, because they're not boxed in anymore. They feel like they're part of the larger organization and they understand more about what's going on.
And cross borders.
Correct.
Technology has done that tremendously as well, as democratized not just the hierarchy, but also the barriers that were perceived to be there before, that you can't reach out to someone that's in a different time zone or a different country. So that's definitely been a benefit.